This all happened when I was 8 years old. It was a Saturday, so I didn't go to school. So I went to watch TV while my mum was still sleeping. When I was going to the couch to get the remote, I heard a voice whisper, "Shh." I froze when I remembered that I saw on a paranormal show, a guy said, "If you have a paranormal encounter, you will freeze for about a minute." Then I just slacked it off as some shock or something, but I was still scared to death from hearing that voice. When my mom woke up, I told her what happened to me earlier. She asked if a car went by, and I was pretty sure there was no car. The next night, I'm in bed watching a little TV when I heard "shh." It was shorter this time, but I was still scared to death. I sat up scanning the room, but nothing was there to cause that noise. Then when I finally got to sleep, I woke up in the middle of the night. I looked at the closet and saw a black figure peeping its head around the corner. I immediately pretended to sleep, and soon enough, I fell asleep again. Then I woke up, and it never happened again. I reside in a bustling city where Lyft and Uber are frequently used, especially during the lively nightlife. Last week, I planned to meet my friends at a downtown bar and opted for a Lyft to avoid the hassles of parking and the risks of drunk driving. The Lyft arrived about 10 minutes after I ordered it. To my surprise, the driver was an elderly man, possibly in his 70s, with a thick accent and a frail demeanor. Strangely, his age and frailty provided a sense of reassurance that I usually wouldn't have felt with an unknown male driver at night. I greeted him with a friendly "good evening," but received no reply. Normally, I'd put on my headphones to avoid conversation, but since he was quiet from the start, I didn't feel the need. Approximately 5 minutes into the ride, he turned up the volume on his stereo and inserted a CD. Suddenly, I heard moaning noises, and I looked up from my phone, initially thinking he was playing adult films. However, it turned out to be a song, with the entire background noise consisting of moaning. The lyrics were even more unsettling, prompting me to put in my headphones and listen to my own music. As we approached my destination, he took a wrong turn into a poorly lit, one-way street. My senses were on high alert, and I turned down my music. He slowed down to the point where I thought he might stop the car. At this moment, I unbuckled my seatbelt, preparing to run if necessary. He then turned around, staring at me without uttering a word. Fearing the worst, I called my friend, informed her of my proximity, and asked her to meet me outside. Finally, he returned to the main street, and we reached my destination. When I tried to open the door, I realized he had activated the child lock the entire time. Fortunately, my friend recognized me and opened the door. I left promptly, and before doing anything else, reported him on the app. Fortunately, nothing untoward happened, but the entire encounter was bizarre and gave me a chilling feeling. Alright, so when I was about 7 years old, I was getting ready for bed. You know those old Disney cartoons that played late at night? Well, I was watching that as I was trying to fall asleep in my bed, when all of a sudden I felt like a weight drop beside me. So I look over, and there's a man in overalls with a red and black flannel and muddy boots. He had a long beard, no glasses, and was laying with his arms across his chest. At first I thought it was my dad, because my dad has a long beard and he works second shift anyway. So I remember going over there trying to push him awake, and he felt really cold, so I went and I touched his beard, and it didn't feel like my dad's beard. So I got off the bed and I flipped on the light, and when I looked back at the bed, he was gone. So first I was all like, oh, that was weird. I was only 7 years old, so I didn't understand. I thought it could have been my dad maybe, but I didn't see him walk out the door or anything. So I get back in bed, and I look around me a little bit as I'm trying to fall asleep. But that's when I hear my dad coming in from work at the back door, and that's when I knew for sure that it wasn't my dad, and it wasn't human. So I used to live in this house. It was like down the road from a graveyard, and it was about every night I would look out there, and I would just come out and see the graveyard in full moonlight and stuff. Well, not every night, but whenever it was bright enough out. There were some nights where I would look out there, and I always kind of saw this shadow of an Indian-looking guy in the distance of the woods. It was always creepy because I would see that guy from time to time, and he would kind of just walk back and forth. I also remember one time I got freaked the hell out because whenever I looked out the window, It wasn't all the way down at the graveyard. It was on the edge of my yard, staring at me. This all took place 7 years ago, when I was 12. One night my mom and I were home alone, and my mom wanted to go out with her sisters. So she went, and I was home alone. So I was watching TV when I heard a male voice. I muted the TV and listened. Then I heard what sounded like a drunk man talking to himself. But what he said is what haunts me to this day. He said, "Hey kid, I've got some candy in my jacket if you come out of the house." I was so terrified, but I also have 3 German Shepherds and 3 bulldogs who are very protective of me and my mom, so I didn't think he would try to break in. So I called my sister's husband and he raced over in his car, and when he got there, the guy ran into the woods and my brother-in-law pulled out a gun and fired into the woods. But sadly he missed, and my brother-in-law called the cops and explained everything that happened, but the cops couldn't find him. I still live at home, but I'm now armed myself to be safe in case something like this ever happens again. My farm has been in my family's name since 1798. It was built on an Indian burial ground. I know that's always what people say, but I'm 100% serious. All throughout my childhood, I've heard stories passed down from my ancestors. Stories like our livestock disappearing, names being called from the tree line. You know, the normal ghost stories you get told by the campfire. I always thought they were just that. Stories, but something that happened yesterday changed my mind completely. While I was trying to sleep watching Seinfeld, like I always do, the dog started to go crazy, which is pretty normal, but then I started to hear whimpers as soon as a scream started. It was like no scream I have ever heard. It was high-pitched and low-pitched at the same time. I immediately grabbed my 12 gauge and ran outside as fast as I could, but then everything just went still. No screaming, no barking, hell, even the cicadas stopped chirping. It was the most terrifying quiet I have ever experienced. I turned on my phone light and started scanning the perimeter of the dog pen when I noticed whispering from the tree line. It was a weird whisper, like it was beckoning me to come closer, but it was in no language I could understand. As any sane person would do, I immediately ran inside and locked the doors and double-checked that the windows were locked. As soon as I got inside, all the noises started again, the cicadas, the dogs, everything was normal. As I went upstairs, I had a terrible feeling of being watched, and I just couldn't sleep. I haven't slept since then, and I'm terrified of what may happen tonight. Someone please tell me what's going on. My aunt had recently gotten divorced and had just bought a new house in a new city. She originally lived in a big city in Tennessee and moved to a little quiet town. She invited us to come stay. My mom, dad, older sister and I. We're from Indiana. So we plan a trip to go stay. My cousins are just a bit younger than I am. I remember arriving and thinking that it was kind of a creepy little town that had an eerie feel to it. There was no one around, very few cars, and no kids playing in the neighborhood. It's the first night there, and we all get settled in to go to sleep. My parents take my aunt's room. My aunt sleeps in one of my cousin's room, I sleep in one of my cousin's room with her, and my sister sleeps in the living room with my other cousin. It's probably around 2 in the morning and my cousin and I are still up talking. We start hearing like a knock coming from the outside wall. We think it's just the wind, considering their backyard is fenced in. I then mentioned to her how I felt like I was being watched, and she commented that she did too, so we assume it's just my sister and cousin spying on us. We're all between 10 and 16 years old. A little while, probably 30 minutes or so later, I hear my sister from the living room quietly calling for my aunt in a shaky voice. Although I'm the younger sister, I'm also the more protective sister, so I go running to the living room to see what's wrong, and she points to the back door. I look over and we can clearly see the doorknob and door shaking violently. I run and get my aunt, and as soon as she turned on the lights, the door stopped moving. We go get my parents, and my dad goes outside and checks the whole house and finds scratches on the back door around the handle. It's creepy to think that this person was probably watching my cousin and I for a while before he decided to try to break it. I'm just thankful he didn't actually get in. We're also not sure how he got in the fence. It's a decently tall wooden fence with no gate. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of that trip. I don't think anyone did. I was 13 at the time of this occurrence, and had been reading creepypastas and true stories since I was 11. Bad habits. I live in Carroll Island, a place where you can find a good amount of forestry everywhere. This was located in Baltimore County, and I loved hearing Goatman stories about this place. I believe there is one in Carroll Island, but that's not the point. I loved this bit of forestry and had always when I was a child. I had lived in this house, still am, since I was 7 to 8. These forests, like any other town, always had some urban legend behind them. Some of these were mostly told by older kids who were just trying to scare the kids who would wander about the streets. The teens would always go into the woods to smoke pot, alcohol. I hated that, but it's how they got their kicks. So one day I was outside of my house, sometime near January on a full moon. Can't recall which month perfectly, just know it was a full moon. This was when some of the clown things were starting to die off and come back in April 2017. I never believed in them, and still don't. But that night I think I did. I walked inside my house with me, my brother and my friend who we'll call Kyle. Kyle was from Dominican Republic and had always believed in the paranormal, so we had a good bit in common. We walked into my brother's room, since it was the largest, and were watching Logan Paul's controversial Suicide Forest video. Once it was done, Kyle remembered it was a full moon, and that the clowns were out tonight. I called bullshit, and told him it was all hoaxes and insane people on highways. He doubled me by saying that, if I didn't believe, they'd get me. I laughed at his remark to that, and told him to stop believing all that stuff. That's when my brother, who I'll call Josh, sat up and said that I was just a pussy. I told him he was a jerk, and that it wasn't funny. We got into a conversation for a good 10 minutes when Kyle finally says, "Then why don't you go prove it?" I said, "Okay," and told them that I would be back. I know just the place to prove it. There was a little place down the road that was put there for a park, essentially. It wasn't funded. The only thing it had was a small walk bridge that was pretty nice. We called it the Duck Pond, but it actually was Seneca Creek. I'm giving all the location details to give you a better understanding of how scary this place would have been at night. I left the house, got onto my bike, and rode off 2 blocks away. At the entrance of the park is another set of woods that is private property for houses on the water and some abandoned houses inside. The entrance is easy to see, can't miss it, and personally, it looks pretty. As I was walking up to the entrance, I had noticed a foul odor. Keep in mind that this is wildlife, where things die and decompose right there. It wasn't helped with the stench of trash reeking from the trash island. I was about to walk into the park when, I shit you not, something had spoken in a low, somewhat luring voice. "Hey there, kiddo. Why don't you come over here?" This is when I went into fucking panic mode. I am someone who isn't scared off so easily, but it was the thought that it could be someone out there. The unknown, which scared me. I turn towards the small patch of bushes near the entrance, and I see something crouched over deep in the bushes, facing me. I couldn't tell if it was a clown or demon. I didn't fucking care at this point. Even thinking about it is making me paranoid. As I was gonna man up and go see what it was, it speaks again. "That's right. Come over here." And I hear a sheathing of a blade. That's when I knew it was time to book it. I instantly wailed out in fright, almost pissing myself, and crashed into that bike. I say, if I hadn't been riding for many years and built up muscle to power out of there, I would have been done. I floor it back to my house. At this point, my body is in complete hysteria, and Kyle said that once I opened the door, I was not comprehensible. It took me a minute to calm down and realize I shouldn't be so scared. I explained to Kyle and Josh what had just happened, and we agreed to go back tomorrow and fuck up whoever was there. We never did, and I never go there at night. Creepy man in the fucking bushes. Whoever you are, if you're still out there, let's not meet again. The night was thick with darkness as I sat alone in my dimly lit living room, the muted glow of the television casting eerie shadows across the walls. My parents were away on a business trip, leaving me in charge of the house for the weekend. With a shiver, I pulled the blanket closer around me, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach. It was around 11:30 at night when I heard the first strange sound coming from outside. I muted the TV and strained my ears, trying to identify the source. It was a faint scratching, almost like a twig being dragged across the window pane. I dismissed it as the wind, but unease still gnawed at me. 15 minutes passed, and I'd convinced myself that my overactive imagination was playing tricks on me. I was about to unmute the TV when I heard it again, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the glass. Annoyed and a little frightened, I rose from the couch and peered out the window. Moonlight revealed nothing but the swaying branches of the tall oak tree in our front yard. My heart pounded as I reluctantly approached the window, pulling the curtain aside just a fraction to peer outside. At first I saw nothing unusual, just the quiet suburban street. But then, my eyes landed on a dark silhouette standing near the tree. A person, cloaked in the shadows. Panic welled up as I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher assured me that an officer would be on their way, but in the meantime I was advised to stay inside and lock all doors and windows. Terrified, I rushed to secure the house. As I moved through the darkened rooms, I heard soft, muffled voices coming from outside, carried on the wind. Straining to listen, I realized it was the stranger whispering my name. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I considered how they could know my name. The stalker's chilling words grew clearer. "Come outside, I just want to talk." I returned to the living room, clutching my phone and watching as the shadowy figure paced around the yard. They seemed to know the layout of my house, moving to the windows and calling out in a voice that was a disturbing imitation of a loved one's. I texted my parents to tell them about the situation, praying they would reply soon. The minutes stretched into hours as I cowered behind locked doors, the stranger persistently circling the house. The police were taking longer than expected to arrive, and with each passing second, my dread deepened. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message from my parents. They had seen my text and were worried. I quickly updated them on the situation, and they insisted I hide in a closet while waiting for the police. I knew they were right, so I retreated to the bedroom closet and waited in silence, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Outside, the stalker grew more desperate, calling for me with increasing urgency. I muted my phone and tried to stifle my sobs. It felt like an eternity passed before I finally heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. The police arrived, and I heard them shouting at the intruder. An intense struggle ensued, with sounds of scuffling, shouts, and finally, the eerie silence of an arrest. It was over. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. The officers knocked on the door and assured me that the intruder had been apprehended. I stepped out, my legs shaky from fear and relief. They explained that the stalker had somehow learned my name and had been lurking outside the house, waiting for an opportunity. As they led the intruder away in handcuffs, I finally got a glimpse of the person who had terrorized me. It was a man I'd never seen before, his eyes filled with a disturbing obsession. They took him away, but the memory of that night would never leave me. This story happened when I was 12 years old. I'm a female and 25. The story I'm about to tell you might not be scary to most, but for me and my parents, it was. I remember it was a Saturday night, around 9 or 10 during summertime. I owned one dog at the time, his name is Benny. My parents decided that night that they feel like going for a walk around the block, walking Benny, and asked me whether I want to join them. I said no, because I wanted to play PWI on my PC, Perfect World International. My parents were okay with leaving me alone since the walk wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes tops. As my parents would get dressed to leave the house, I logged in PWI and looked around in my guild and global chat to see if anyone was on. For some reason, no one was, so I decided to join my parents. I get dressed, I put Benny on his leash, and we all leave. I'd like to mention that I lived in an apartment building that had 10 floors, and we lived on the very first floor. Not sure how to explain, but you have the basement of the building and then the first row of apartments. Basically, you enter the building and already are facing apartments. I lived in the very first one. I remember always hating that because whoever would pass by our door, we would hear them at any time of the day or night. Whoever was lurking at night, we would hear them. It was somewhat eerie to live on floor 0. Anyway, we leave the house. My dad closes the door. We had 3 keyholes and a steel bar that would block the door from the inside. The bar covered half of the door. Precautions were my father's obsession. We exit the building and enjoy our walk. After 15 minutes, we realize the wind has changed from warm summer wind to incoming storm wind. My mum makes the call to go back home, as Benny already did all his duties, so we all return. We open the building door, climb the 5 stairs to our door, and attempt to open it. And my father does the following: unlocks the first 3 locks, and then attempts to unlock the metal bar that holds the door locked. At that moment, my father pauses, turns around at us with the most serious face I've ever seen on him, and whispers to us to call the police and ring the neighbor's door. My mum goes to the second apartment, and the neighbor, who I will call Ted, comes out asking my father what happened. My dad whispered to him, covering the see-through hole of the door. Someone is in our house. He or they are holding the door. Please stay here with my family and attempt to open it. I will be back. After saying that, I see my father rush, all by himself, around the building, in the dark. I say dark because we didn't have a streetlight on the side of our apartment facing the block garden. My dad disappears into the darkness. I go outside too, not following him too much, but only to hear if he's in trouble. He's my dad, don't judge me. As soon as I get out, I hear him shout, "Hey, you, come back. Who the hell do you think you are? I called the police." At the same time, I hear him shout. I look at Ted, who manages to open the door and enter the house. I go after them and enter my house. It no longer felt like my house. In just 15 minutes while we were walking, the home invaders made a complete mess of our house. All our shelves and wardrobes were pulled out, our clothes scattered all over the house. Benny's dry food was all over the floor, indicating they must have tripped in his bowls, probably not knowing we owned a dog. But what scared me the most was how organized they were. I say they because, after seeing the disaster that was left behind, we knew it was impossible for just one person to hold the door, steal and organize what they would want to take with them. I say organized because the thieves put in our living room, all packed and ready, what they wanted, but couldn't, steal. On the couch they placed our laptops, one of our TVs, my father's collection of coins, our phones, chargers, wallets, and even my father's camera. He's a photographer, and that week he had to attend a wedding. They didn't have enough time to steal all of that, so they just settled with some of my mom's jewelry and some pocket money. After seeing this, in my silly child mind, I rushed to my room to check my piggy bank. I always saved up money from whatever chores I did. It wasn't much, but it was my work and savings, and at that time, I thought they stole it too. When I enter my room, I see the metal bars covering my windows are cut open and my window broken. This is how they entered, through my room. My room is the only room facing the side of the building and the one most secluded from views. Needless to say, I never felt safe in my own room in which I had to live for the next 10 years of my life until I moved in with my fiancé. The police arrives, they start throwing white dust. I have no idea what that is still. All over our house to find fingerprints. They take pictures, take our statements, analyze my room and window. They were unable to catch the home invaders, but were able to tell us that this invasion was not the only one in our neighborhood. During that month, another 4 houses were broken into, one of them being the home of a cop, not related with the cops at our home. They told us that the invaders analyzed their victims, learned their schedule, even knew where the children's rooms were as they seemed to be entering the houses through the children's windows. All the families affected by them had children. They did not expect us to be back that soon and panicked, hence one of them was holding the door with his body so that the others could flee. The person after which my dad was shouting was, probably, the one holding the door and escaping last through my broken window. I don't know what could have happened if I didn't change my mind and give up on raiding for gears in PWI. I would probably have come face to face with these invaders. I am happy I didn't, and I hope to God I never ever meet with them. Period. The clock's hands struck midnight, and I was alone in our old, creaky house. My parents had gone away for the weekend, leaving me in charge. It was a typical Friday night. Netflix, snacks, and relaxation. But that sense of being alone in the dark gnawed at my nerves. Around 1 in the morning, I decided to venture downstairs to the kitchen for a late-night snack. As I descended, the silence seemed to thicken, and each step echoed throughout the empty house. The stairs seemed longer than usual, and my heart pounded in my chest. I grabbed a bag of chips and a soda, trying to convince myself that my anxiety was merely a product of my overactive imagination. When I returned to the staircase, I saw it. A shadowy figure at the bottom of the stairs, back turned to me, just beyond the dim glow of the kitchen light. My throat tightened, and I stopped dead in my tracks. "Mom! Dad! Is that you?" I called out, my voice quivering. The figure remained motionless, and fear knotted my stomach. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, ready to dial 911, but then the figure began to move, its silhouette turning slowly to face me. The man was tall, dressed in a long tattered overcoat that swayed eerily as he shifted. I could barely make out his features in the dim light, but the unsettling grin that stretched across his face was unmistakable. His eyes glinted with an unsettling, predatory light. My instincts kicked in, and I turned to flee back up the stairs. As I dashed upward, I heard the stranger following, his footsteps quickening with each step I took. I had to get to my room and lock the door, but he was gaining on me. I could hear his heavy breathing, sending shivers down my spine. Just as I reached the top of the staircase, I heard him snarl, "You can't hide from me." With newfound determination, I lunged for my bedroom and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. My heart raced, my hands trembling, as I dialed 911. "Please, hurry. There's an intruder in my house," I whispered urgently to the dispatcher. The stranger's voice seeped through the door, his words chilling my blood. "I know you're in there. You can't keep me out." It was an empty threat, but his persistence was unnerving. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me as I cowered in my room, feeling a mix of fear and helplessness. The minutes stretched into an agonizing wait for the police. I listened intently, hoping to hear the sirens grow closer. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the silence, and I knew the police were outside. Their authoritative voices and the pounding of heavy boots on the stairs soon followed. "Open up! This is the police!" they shouted. I hesitated for a moment, trying to assure myself that the nightmare was over. I opened the door, and the sight that greeted me was a relief beyond words. The police had apprehended the intruder, who now lay in handcuffs. As they led the man away, I saw his face, twisted by a mixture of anger and defeat. He was a complete stranger, a face I had never seen before in my life, which made the ordeal even more unsettling. I wondered why he had targeted our house and what he had intended to do. The stranger's dark eyes still haunt me. I am a 19-year-old female, but when this happened, I was 17. So this happened around the beginning of April of 2018. I was out with my family and my still current boyfriend shopping for prom stuff. I wasn't really big into the whole prom thing, but was going for, I guess, the experience. The most boring night of my life, by the way, but anyways, back to the story. After the whole shopping thing was finally over, we decided to go get food from somewhere. My older brother mentioned A+ Buffet Mongolian Grill. We all decided that sounded pretty good and headed over there. As we're eating, laughing and talking, you know what people do, I noticed an older man, maybe late 60s to early 70s, looking at me, smiling. I turned around thinking maybe he was looking at someone else, but no one was behind me. So that meant he was looking straight at me. I got a little weirded out, but brushed it off and continued eating. A minute or two later, I look at him again. Now not only is he still looking at me, smiling, but he's also making kissy faces at me. I got a little nervous and uncomfortable, so I quietly mentioned it to my family and boyfriend. They all told me to ignore him and that we're leaving soon. I calmed down a little bit, but I couldn't help but look back at the man. I wish I didn't, because when I did, my stomach dropped, and I was now on the verge of crying. He's now wiggling his tongue in between his middle and index finger. I'm sure everyone knows what that means. I couldn't take it anymore. I started crying and ran out of the restaurant. I know, call me a pussy, but I've been assaulted before. And obviously going through that shit was a very traumatic experience for me, as for anyone who's been through it. But I was extremely uncomfortable, and I couldn't be in there a second longer. Turns out after I left, my foster mom yelled at him for making me uncomfortable, but he wouldn't even acknowledge her presence. He was too busy staring at my boyfriend with rage plastered on his face. I haven't gone back to that restaurant or seen that man since, and I would like to keep it that way. Me and my family were planning to stay over at my aunt's house in Pennsylvania for the weekend. Me and my brother were going alone with my aunt's brother. Me and my brother are very close to him, so I never felt any weird vibes. We just got off New Jersey and it started turning dark. We were still on the road when I have this strange feeling that someone was following us. We were only 20 minutes away from our aunt's house, so I didn't really think of it. Until this car, it looked like a grey but small car. One of those standards cars. I had the feeling it was following us for the past 20 minutes driving to my aunt's place. That car was following us. Just to let you guys know, I'm one of those people who will be very paranoid about everything. We just pulled up to the house. The car behind us started to slow down when we pulled over. I saw it turn right, and it was like there was no sign of the car. It is 1 a.m. right now. My aunt has these 2 big windows showing the outside, and my aunt's house is really big, so it's showing down at the ground. It's currently 2:15 in the morning. I decided to look at the windows, and then I froze. I saw the same car, and some guy really tall looking at the window. I got into a panic. I went back just to make sure he wasn't there and see if was dreaming, and he was gone. I'm sleeping currently in the first floor, while everyone is sleeping in the second. If you were asking where my brother is, he is upstairs with my mom. But I woke up to the basement door being open and I could see a figure coming out and then running towards me fast. I didn't do anything. He grabbed me. Then I screamed. Everyone came down and the man ran back downstairs. Me being paranoid, I followed him but I fell and he drove away in that same stupid ass car. After this situation, I have made a promise to always trust my gut. Okay, so let me get this straight. I'm a 15-year-old girl who lives in New Zealand, but when this took place I was around 12 years old. In 2016, a couple days before Christmas, the worst thing happened to us. We found out my auntie died, which was on my dad's side, and they were very close. She was a jockey, and she fell off the horse, and it crushed her. Her favorite thing was the smell of lilies. This will be useful for later on. Anyway, after about 2 years of her death, we visited her again for Christmas, and we have been here to see her many times, but this time it felt different in a way. The air was heavy, and I got this wave of dread. It was so overwhelming that I had to stay in the car for a bit. Once I thought that the bad feeling had calmed down, I decided to hop out and look around the cemetery, and as I was doing so, I smelt a familiar smell, like the smell of lilies, and at first it was comforting in a way, but then I felt like I was being watched, but like I could tell that whatever that was watching me didn't want me here, like I needed to leave. So I listened to my gut feeling and booked it back to the rest of my family. Not shortly after, once all of us were in the car driving back, we saw that there was something in the middle of the road, so we stopped. But the longer we stared at it, the more we realized it was my auntie, and she looked worried. And about 2 seconds later, a car comes flying by in full speed, and then she disappeared. I'll tell you now, it scared me, and I couldn't sleep that night, but the longer I thought about it, the more I realized that she saved us that day, and that she really is looking over at us. I just wanted to get this off my chest, and I know you might not believe me because I wouldn't if I heard this, but it is 110% real, and it's still vividly stuck in my head till this day. Back in 2022, I, a 27-year-old female, found myself in rural Australia after moving from Melbourne to be with my fiancé, now my ex-fiancé, 29-year-old male, stationed at the local army base. We sought refuge from Melbourne's chaotic COVID lockdowns, choosing a house in a rather dubious part of the town. The house, aged and surrounded by large glass windows, revealed almost every corner from the outside. The town, isolated and hours away from any major city, held an eerie charm. As night fell, my solitude increased, with my boyfriend away on a week-long field assignment. The summer heat was relentless, forcing me to leave windows and even the back door open during restless nights. On the 5th day alone, after a long walk into town, I returned, seeking respite from the heat. The living room became my haven as I immersed myself in PlayStation and TV. As night fell, strange noises echoed from the path beside the kitchen, seemingly from a neighbor's workshop. Oblivious to the impending danger, I prepared for bed around 10 p.m., locking the back door after finishing a round of Call of Duty. With lights off, I heard louder noises, attributing them to the neighbor or perhaps an animal. Dismissing the unease, I set my phone aside, ready to sleep. Suddenly, a series of bangs on the back door shattered the stillness, shaking the house. Glass shattered, and the relentless banging continued. In a panic, I tried to scare them off, yelling and barricading myself in the bedroom. Frantically, I called 000, Australia's emergency line, crouching in fear as the assailants turned their attention to the bedroom door. Sirens wailed in the distance, the banging ceased, and police lights pierced the darkness. Amid confusion, I found solace in realizing it was the police. With the arrival of my boyfriend and the police, the horrifying scene was revealed. The back gate was broken, the bedroom door cracked, the back door kicked off its hinges, and the laundry window smashed. The assailants' 2 shadows in the night remained at large. The trauma strained my relationship, leading to our eventual move. PTSD lingered, and I now reside in a secure city apartment, surrounded by cameras and accompanied by 2 vigilant dogs. To the intruders who shattered my peace that night, let's not meet. This unfolded around 10 years ago. At 21, I occupied my first apartment, a small bachelor pad in a sketchy area. Having grown up in a tough town, I knew to keep my head down and avoid unnecessary trouble. My apartment sat behind a bar, where patrons often gathered outside to smoke, their gaze inadvertently directed at my place. Typically, interactions were minimal, just nods and greetings. Until one unsettling evening. Returning from work, I passed the bar and noticed an exceptionally tall man smoking outside. As I walked by, he fixated on me, and although I nodded, he offered no acknowledgement, just an unwavering stare. Uncomfortable, but dismissive, I didn't dwell on it. An hour later, a knock echoed through my door, odd considering visitors needed buzzing in. With only 8 units and unfamiliar neighbors, I hesitated, not eager for conversation. The knocking persisted. Finally, I shouted, "Who is it?" No response. Again, louder. "Who's there?" A voice replied, "It's Steve." I knew no Steve and firmly responded, "I don't know anyone named Steve, you must have the wrong apartment." He insisted, "You may not know me, but I know you. Open up so we can talk." Approaching the peephole, I discovered the tall guy from the bar. Angrily, I threatened, "Get lost, or I'm calling the cops." His footsteps retreated, and I heard the building door open and close. He was gone, or so I believed. Minutes later, peeking out my window, I saw him in the parking lot, seemingly talking to himself. Panicking, I phoned my landlord, who lived nearby. He advised calling the police and promised to investigate with his brother. As I awaited police assistance, my landlord and his brother confronted the tall man in the parking lot. Spotting them, he fled, eluding their pursuit. 5 minutes later, the police arrived. I recounted the events and provided a description. The officer, visibly concerned, shared, "We've had reports of a man matching that description involved in sexual assaults. Thank goodness you didn't open the door." Days later, the officer called, revealing that their investigation, including a chat with the bar owner, led to the tall man's arrest after he reappeared. To the tall, creepy figure from the bar, it was a close call, and I genuinely hope our paths never cross again. In my early 20s, I befriended a girl named Emily. She came from a challenging family background, with neglectful parents. Her mother was verbally abusive, and her father seemed indifferent to everything. Loneliness led Emily to seek solace on dating sites, meeting strangers face to face within days. Our friendship was peculiar. Sometimes I found her annoying, yet I empathized with her profound loneliness. Despite occasional reluctance, I'd accept her invitations. In our small friend group, she tried to bring us together frequently, transforming into a lively version of herself. It was evident she cherished the company of friends who treated her with respect. Suddenly, Emily announced she had a boyfriend named Alex. This surprised us, knowing her history of brief encounters with men from online platforms. Soon, she arranged for our friend group to meet Alex. Meeting him was awkward. He barely spoke, avoided eye contact, and emitted an uncomfortable vibe. Over time, Emily claimed Alex disliked me, accusing me of using her for money, a baseless accusation given I often covered her expenses. Months passed with Alex persistently poisoning Emily's perception of me. He dressed indifferently, never smiled, emitted a pervasive odor of weed, and overall gave off an unsettling vibe. Emily succumbed to his influence, concealing our friendship and excluding me from gatherings. One day, Emily invited me to her place. Initially agreeing, I noticed she was diverting from my house during the drive. Questioning her, she evaded my queries with an unsettling smirk. Realizing we were headed to Alex's place, I demanded an explanation. She coldly replied, "Alex wants to talk to you." Furious and apprehensive about the creepy guy who despised me, I demanded to be let out of the car. Locked in, I seized an opportunity at a red light, grabbed her wallet, and fled. Blocking her number, severing social media ties, and warning mutual friends, I cut all connections. Emily lost not only me, but the entire friend group. Since that day, I've had no contact with her, hoping she has found solitude in her own choices. To my old friend Emily, I hope we never meet again. I grew up in a small rural town where life was quiet, and leaving doors unlocked was the norm. Our family had a large, dramatic cat named Whiskers, who, despite his flair for theatrics, was dearly loved. One summer, when I was around 9 or 10, Whiskers began acting strangely. Normally, he'd sleep peacefully in my room and occasionally wake me up for a midnight snack. However, on this particular night, he was relentless. He banged on my parents' bedroom door until he got in, meowing loudly. Our bedrooms were adjacent, and I called him to come to bed, but he refused and continued his fuss. My mom, perturbed, went down to the kitchen, and Whiskers led her there, still meowing frantically. She discovered his food bowl was full, and he just stood by the kitchen door. Whiskers usually had free access via his cat door in the garage, so there was no need for someone to let him out. Mom assumed my brother must have left the kitchen door ajar, but she wasn't going to stand there holding it open forever. After shutting the door, she went back to bed, firmly closing her bedroom door this time. I had treats in my room for Whiskers, but he continued meowing at my parents' door. I brought him into my room, trying to get him to settle, but he was persistent. I opened the door, and he darted downstairs. Shortly after, I heard what sounded like a door slamming. With siblings often up watching TV or using the bathroom, I thought nothing of it. Whiskers returned to my room but sat at the foot of my bed, staring at my door. Morning brought commotion, and I found my parents on the phone with the police. While making coffee, my mom discovered her rings missing from the jewelry dish by the sink. Panic set in as my dad noticed the ATV was gone from the backyard, the key removed from the key ring. The police were called and questions ensued. No one had a clue when the intrusion occurred. My mom asked my middle brother about the previous night. He denied being in the kitchen and mentioned he had been in the basement since dinner, watching a movie before heading to bed. Realization struck my mum. The cat, relentless in his meowing, was likely trying to warn us of an intruder. The robber, familiar with our habits, had likely planned to steal more but fled, fearing the cat might wake the entire house. Though the culprit was never caught, our dramatic feline, Whiskers, turned out to be an unexpected and heroic guardian. To the robber who entered our house, let's not meet. The following is a very true experience. I've never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if in some way unknown, it changed me. My parents had a house in the Inland Empire of Southern California, and at the time my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house was a 2-story house located in a cul-de-sac. On the bottom floor there was 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath. All you could see from the street was the garage and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door, you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran along the side of the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you can see from the street, then you pass the bathroom window, and then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now, for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down to the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap with nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about it then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mother was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere I suddenly awoke, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know what woke me, or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the night's light of my bedroom, I sat up and started looking around my room. All of the sudden something caught my eye at the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the street light reflecting on the window, but I knew for a fact that there was only one street light, and what I was looking at was two obvious glowing spots that were spaced apart as if on someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember thinking these things, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered then that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night, but this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These were two very solid, bright white glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright nothing else stood out. That void or face around the eyes looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how could a cat be big like a person? And why would a cat stand up to stare in my bedroom? The curiosity got me, and I went for it. I flipped my covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window, and put my feet on the floor. This is the moment the creepiest thing happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed and got on my knees to get a closer look at this so-called cat. When at this very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes begins to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween. Eyes still locked on me, not blinking once. The feeling of dread and fear shot through my body. Completely terrified, I burst into tears immediately and booked it down the hallway, through the living room and up the stairs to tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, it felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset, I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down just enough for me to get out the words, There is white eyes looking at me through my window, on the bottom. Stutter, crying hard. Are you sure? My mom asked. I cry out, yes. She didn't even go down to look, she just called the police. I don't remember the time it took for them to arrive or what they said because I finally fell asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door and my mom going to open it. The cop speaks to her and I hear her say, okay, thank you, good night. And she shuts the door. Did they find it, Mommy? I asked, half asleep. No, honey. He said they couldn't find anyone. My mom told me softly. It's okay now. Just try to go back to sleep. It's safe to say that the next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward, and I'm in middle school now. Every now and then, I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there, those unforgettable white eyes. One day a random thought came up, and I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She tells me, yes, of course. Why? I don't know, just wondering, I guess, I said. Then my mom proceeds to say, well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, he told me they made it a priority to get out to our house as soon as they could, because not very long before I called 911, they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window. In our same neighborhood. Hearing that sent chills down my spine, and to this day I wonder who or what was looking at me that night. Every year, I visit my grandparents' house in the summer. This was about 2 summers ago. I was around 11 at the time, but I still remember everything that happened. I was there for about a week. I was taking a trip alone. I had flown out. But on the 3rd day, some scary shit started happening. Whenever I went to breakfast with my granddad, there was this guy in a black hoodie that always sat behind us. He never ordered, and everyone at the restaurant got a bad vibe from him, they said. Also, that week, my grandma and I got an unmarked package. We threw it away as fast as we could. On Friday night, my Uncle Michael and Aunt Kate were supposed to come over for dinner. My grandma and I were making yogurt cookies in the kitchen and listening to music on shared AirPods. Some background. My grandparents live in a big house in the middle woods, however it is very close to the main highway. Their driveway is on a steep hill. Also, at least once a year, we get a huge summer rainstorm. Michigan isn't known for that, but trust me on this. Anyway, we were making cookies during one of these rainstorms, and the power went out. Usually power outages don't faze me, but for some reason this one was way too dark. My Uncle Michael and Aunt Kate said they still should come because the roads were flooding, and they live on a low plane. They also said there was a guy in a hood on their driveway. When they got there, they banged on the door, so I let them in. Usually they tell me how I've gotten really tall, or how pretty I have gotten, but they brushed me aside and went to my grandparents. Being the kid I was, I decided to eavesdrop, and they said that there was a man in a hoodie on our driveway, and he had a gun. Let's get this straight. I am not like other girls. Most girls would have ran, especially at that age, but not me. I had to see this, but I wish I had been like other girls at that moment. It was the scariest shit I had ever seen. There was a guy in a hood with a gun, and the hood covered his eyes, and he smiled at me. I ran back unnoticed. They wanted to call the police, but there was no power, and they couldn't turn their phones on for some reason. Some more background. In my gram and granddad's room, there is this walk-in closet. On the ceiling, there is a trapdoor that unfolds into a ladder. This leads to an attic inside their roof. I was the only one light enough to fit, so I went up there with my iPad and my AirPod. I don't know where they hid, but they must have done a good job of it, or he would have found them. I stayed up there for hours. It was freezing inside that roof, and played games and listened to music. But at a break in the storm, I heard the glass windows by the front door shatter. I clicked off my iPad and hid it in an old box. I laid flat on my stomach behind a trunk and closed my eyes. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I stayed totally still and quiet. Someone who was not my family opened the trap door. Keep in mind, we are inside a roof, so it was pitch black. I shut my eyes again. I think it poked its head around for a while, but it couldn't find me, so it went back down. Hours later, the power came back on, and they called the police, who got me down. My grandma gave me a blanket and hot cider while they talked to the police. When they talked to me, I told them about the shattered glass, but they said that was impossible because there was no sign of a break-in. I told them he had come up and looked for me, and that he had a gun. They told me I must have imagined it, but my family said they saw it too, but a deputy cut in and said she had seen a person in a black hood run away into the woods. The police posted outside the house that night, just to be safe anyway though. Nothing like this has happened since. But a year later, the same day in July, the power went out, and we heard footsteps coming from that attic. We still don't know exactly what happened, but I'm just glad I stayed in there. I am just praying it never comes back. So, I'm new to Reddit, and I don't know what subreddit I should post this on, but something strange is happening in my home. So first of all, this might seem like one of those stories where they claim someone is living in their attic and stuff gets misplaced or something like that, but my situation is different. So I moved in here a year ago. It's just a small duplex, and I don't want to give away too much for safety reasons, but lately me and my family have noticed that our ceiling has weird lines in the paint. It wasn't like that before we moved in, and we couldn't possibly have done anything that could have caused it. My mom has also claimed to be hearing footsteps coming from above. I also should mention that we have a way to the attic in a hallway right in front of my bedroom door. Also, a few months ago, the cops came to our doorstep to tell us that someone had broken into the back of our duplex. And by the way, we have a laundromat in the back and a shared walkway to take out our trash. Anyways, we have a lot of creeps going behind there, to the point that by the first month of living there, our landlord put a lock on it, so random people couldn't just open it. Our old neighbors moved out a couple months ago, and we just got new neighbors. I heard my other neighbors getting into an argument, but that's not the alarming part. In between their arguing, I could hear the latch of the back gate opening and closing, and someone walking by my back door. I thought it was the neighbors, but it couldn't be them, because nobody goes by there unless it's trash day. Also, I was home alone when this happened. When my parents got home, the neighbors stopped then and asked if we lived next to them, which we did. Then they told us that they thought someone was in the back, so they called the cops. So nonetheless, we have a bunch of creeps that come by our neighborhood. So back to the attic. I thought my parents, especially my mum, were just paranoid, but just now, my mum was walking in the living room, then just stopped, but we could still hear footsteps. Mind you, everyone is asleep, it's just me and my mom. Hearing this, my mom pulled out her camera and started recording, but my mom was talking so loud that she heard someone walking then. When she said that, the footsteps stopped. Now, I don't know what to do, so I'm asking you for your advice. Is me and my family just paranoid, or it's there someone in my attic? Also, forgot to mention we only hear footsteps at around 11 at night, and we also have a dog, and he's very hostile and would bark if someone lives there, but he never barked, so I need help. Is someone living in my attic, and what should I do? Tell me if you know what's happening and if you have been through something similar. Please, I really need answers. Before I start, I may as well get some history on the Whaley House. Before the Whaley House was built, it used to be the gallows, since the graveyard was right next to it. All of the gallows victims went well, until a person I believe was named Yankee Jim, or James. James was a unique man. He stood up to 6.4, and when he went to the gallows and the platform dropped, it took up to 7 to 10 minutes until he died. And with that, the curse took place. When the Whaleys built their house in 1857, that's when things went a little weird. The first death of the Whaley house was Thomas. Thomas was only 18 months old, and he died of scarlet fever. This was unusual because scarlet fever only is in the age group of 5 to 15 years of age. Now the other deaths aren't really reported, except for Violet's death. Violet tried to commit suicide multiple times. Then she shot herself in the stomach and bled to death on the couch. Ever since the death of the Whaleys, people have reported paranormal experiences, most of which are the stairs. It is said that the top of the gallows is the 9th step, and most people feel pressure on their head. Sometimes it comes with being lightheaded. But if you are related to the government, such as the Army, Navy, Air Force, Police, etc., you will feel some type of burning sometimes. Now let's start the story. I think I was about 13 or 14 at the time. It was almost time to start school again from summer, and my family and I decided to go to Old Town. Besides the fact that it was near the anniversary of the death of Violet Whaley, so the house was a bit more active than usual. And as always, we always started with going to a restaurant to eat, then we go to Whaley House. The Whaley House always gives me the shivers, but I always assume that it's just from the stories that they tell. When my family went inside, we split into 2 groups. I went with my brother, and my mother went with my father. My brother and I decided to go upstairs to go ghost hunting with a ghost hunting app. But on our way upstairs, we always feel this pressure on our head on the 9th step, sometimes even burning. I guess this made sense since my grandpa was in the Navy, and my grandpa Hank was in the US Air Force. I hate being upstairs because I always get an unsteady feeling. We talked to the employee for a bit. He told us some history, and we decided to take the conversation near the master bedroom. That was a big mistake. While talking, I was facing my back towards the stairs. 4 minutes into talking, I felt something pulling me back. As if I was going to fall down the stairs, I grabbed a hold of the master bedroom doorway, and I could not let go of it until we had to leave because, oh dear God, if I let go of that doorway, I would be pulled back for goodness sake. When we were leaving and going down the stairs, we would always feel the pressure going downstairs. When we were in the living area, we talked to another one of the employees. I told her what happened, and she said, "You know, I fell down the stairs today too. I mean, the house has been more active recently. Maybe it's because of Violet's death anniversary." This story is true, and still haunts me to my very core. I was young, about 7 to 8-ish years old. I have always been sensitive to the paranormal and still am. I slept in my father's room just because it was warmer and a lot less creepy. On this particular night, I woke up out of dead sleep, in need of the washroom. It was literally only 5 feet away down the hall. My sister and I being afraid of the dark, my father always kept that light on for us. As I ventured out of the room, the light blinded me, but I knew it was safe because the light was on, so I continued walking. As I walked past the linen closet that we played hide and seek in, it opened just barely of a crack. I was literally 2 feet away from the bathroom, but my dumbass decided to put my fucking hand on the door handle of the closet when it burst open. And a woman stepped out. She looked just like my father's girlfriend, except she was beaten. I'm talking about black eyes, bruised lips, eyes dark as night, and wearing a dark dress. She picked me up by my shoulders and shook me, telling me to look at what my father has done to her and her babies. I glanced down and saw her 2 children. The youngest, being 2, was shoved in furthest corner, puking profusely, and eating it and repeating the same process, crying as she did so. Her son, on the other hand, he was bleeding from his nose, eyes, ears, everywhere, crying and moaning in pain. My ears were engulfed with my dad's screaming girlfriend and her children's crying. My grandmother taught me that if something evil appears to you, to close your eyes, and after a very long minute of the shouting, a crying getting louder, it stopped. I was placed against the floor. I opened my eyes. The closet was wide open with nothing to be seen. The bathroom light was still on. Needless to say, I ran back to bed. I never made it to the bathroom. Fuck. I never went back upstairs after that. I live in a massive subdivision that surrounds a bunch of woods affectionately referred to as the trails. I suppose the people who own it left it untouched in case they wanted to add more streets. Anyway, I live down the street from one of the main entrances that most people use and know of. My friends and I were a resilient bunch who liked to go out there and have fires, get drunk and smoke a little, if you know what I mean. So considering we were out there so much, we decided we were going to build ourselves a little hideout and fort of sorts where we could party and even camp. We ended up with a good small clearing off of one of the winding paths where we had set up a good-sized lean-to with some evergreen on top as our roof and named it Bear Cave. Now for the incident in question. This happened back when I was about 17 to 19 years old. I had just gotten off work and had gone to grab some fast food. My friends had called me earlier letting me know we were going to meet at Bear Cave. So after I got home, I changed into some warmer clothes, as this was during late fall to early winter, and it had been unusually cold that night. So I decided I should get out there as soon as possible, and decided to take my food with me and eat there. Now, it's about 8:30 and the moon was barely visible through the trees, but knowing the trail like the back of my hand, I wasn't worried, and assumed they would already have a fire started. As I approached, I walked up to our hidden entrance and saw there was no fire and heard no sounds. I took my phone out and texted one asking where they were. They replied something along the lines of, "Sorry man, we're going to be about 15 minutes. Great, I thought to myself. I ducked in and started trying to scrape together some wood and kindling and get something started. Unfortunately, everything was wet and without a proper flashlight. This was before they were standard on phones. I couldn't get into the brush and dig anything up. Soon after, I decided I might as well eat and hurriedly scarfed down my 2 burgers. Before I knew it, I had been sitting out there for about 20 minutes and still no sign of anyone. I tried giving a couple of them a call, and after 5 minutes with no callback, I texted them. Still no response. At this point, I was about fed up and my phone was about to die, so I made a mental note. 10 more minutes, and I am gone. At this point, I squatted down, holding my knees to my chest and tried getting warm. My back was to our little hut at the back of the site. I thought I heard something behind me, a slight crunch. I looked over my shoulder, and from behind the shelter, I saw what looked like 2 beady eyes, glinting from the little moonlight, entering through the trees. I quickly and quietly turned my full body to face it. At this point, I feel as though I'm about to throw up or shit myself one. But keeping my mind about myself, I slowly reached to my right where I had laid a stick, just in case something like this might happen. If this was a dog, it was big. And let me just clarify, this was not a wolf, as I live in the south, and coyotes do not get this big. Something wasn't right. It just stared unblinking, as if through me and made no sound whatsoever. I realized whatever this was, it wanted to come at me. Thinking fast, I decided my best interest was to throw it off guard. I threw the stick and without seeing if it made contact turned and ran swiftly out the entrance, expertly placing my feet in all the safe places through the trail, assuring I wouldn't trip through, maintaining max speed. I didn't stop till I saw street lights and was safely on the road. About this time I see my friends pulling up, and all I told them was, I saw something. They didn't seem too interested and tried to go out. I told them sternly no, and suggested we just go to my house. This seemed suitable to them, and so we went. I still don't know what I saw out there, and it was as though everyone forgot about it. I continued to go back out there, but only at daytime, or if at night, only with a friend. But I will never forget those unwavering eyes. Some background here. We've lived in our apartment for about 8 months. The first half of that, we had instances of hearing what we thought were our 2 toddlers getting out of bed when they weren't, seeing things out of our peripherals, an occasional lock turning or cabinet thump, and getting general weird, bad, creepy vibes once in a while. Our kids have never seen or heard anything, luckily, just me and my husband. Mostly me. Now we also have seen way less, since every time the creep level went up, my husband would walk around praying and bless the house, and each of us with oil my mother-in-law had blessed at church. I can also almost peg the week since the very last event to when I started having my oldest pray every single night in bed before sleeping. Quick layout. Our hallway ends at our master bedroom, the boys' room on one side of us, and the bathroom on the other. I'm awake in bed, husband at work, my oldest in the living room watching VHS tapes, youngest still asleep in bed. So I'm laying in bed this morning reading Nosleep, as it were, on my phone, and our door starts to open, then goes back to the cracked open position we always keep it in. It's only later, when texting my husband, I realize there was no hand on the knob. I sit up and keep staring at the crack, waiting for one of the kids to come in. Eventually, I see what looks like Lucas, my 3-year-old, stand up and walk down the hall. No shirt, so I know it's him, because David, 5, is dressed from PJs last night. I didn't see hair color or diaper, because the crack wasn't much, and I'm not wearing my glasses, but I did see skin where a shirt would be and his height, so I assumed it was him. About 10 minutes later, David comes in our room and asks for spaghetti, so I get up and ask him to toss a block he found in their room. I look for Lucas in the living room. He's not in there. I tell David, wait a minute, and I go in their room. And Lucas is still in his spot on his side of the bed, under the blankets, completely asleep. So, either I'm not getting enough sleep, my kid just went back to bed, which never happens. Once they're up, or this ghost kid thing has now started to look like one of my kids and is now messing with me. I'm a 20-year-old female. This happened to me last summer, and it still gives me chills to think about. That day, I went to the thrift store with my boyfriend, who's also 20, and as we were heading back home, I suggested we pick up some sushi for dinner at our nearby grocery store. As my boyfriend works night shifts, he was already feeling tired, and suggested that I go to the grocery store while he goes back home. We live in the busy part of our city, where the mall, library, city hall, restaurants, major stores, etc. are all a couple minutes away from our home. Not to mention, I live in a relatively safe city with little crime, so I was more than all right with going by myself. Now, I truly wish I hadn't. As we parted ways, I was walking through the parking lot of the grocery store when a stocky man, about 6'5", probably in his early to mid-40s, approached me. With a wide smile and wider eyes, he said, "Wow, you are stunning." I simply thanked him and tried walking away. He cut me off, saying, "I have never seen someone as beautiful as you before." I was immediately filled with dread. I looked back, hoping my boyfriend was still in sight. No luck. It may seem like an exaggeration to be wary of a person right off the bat, but having read and watched true crime and horror stories for years, coupled with having extreme social anxiety and being a smaller woman with zero fighting skills, I have always sided with caution. Not to mention, with his eyes and smile, he honestly reminded me of a buffer, Art the Clown, from Terrifier, minus the clown costume and lack of talking. The man roped me into a one-sided conversation, asking me my name and how old I was. I gave him a fake name and told him I was 19. He laughed and said, unnaturally excitedly, "That's good. That means you're a true woman now." What the actual fuck? My boyfriend later told me I should have lied and said I was under 18, as this may have made the man uninterested. From the red flags I got from the man, I seriously doubt that. He then stuck his phone out, asking for my number. I refused, saying I had a boyfriend. And, "I just want to talk to you." I repeated that I had a boyfriend. It was unnerving how his smile never wavered, despite showing that I wasn't interested. Like he wasn't understanding, or he just didn't care. He sounded confused, but still grinning. He stepped towards me and asked, "So you don't want to cheat on your boyfriend?" As if to say, "What do you mean you don't want to go out with a scary-ass man that's double your age?" Speechless, I stepped back and gave pleading looks to the people walking in and out of the grocery store. After the last time I refused, his smile suddenly dropped, while he placed his hand on my back, saying in a now cold, firm tone, "Come on, I have a nice car I can drive you around in. Let's check out one of these restaurants." Seeing a person's entire demeanor change with the flip of a switch was something I only saw in movies and TV shows, and seeing it in this situation fucking terrified me. Going into panic mode, I somehow found the courage to push myself off of him and almost shouted, "Sorry, I really have to go buy my groceries." Noticing that people were staring at us, his sick smile reappeared and said with a low voice, "All right then, I'll see you later." I practically ran into the grocery store with so much relief. I glanced back, hoping to see him get in his car to try getting his license plate number, only to see the man just standing in the middle of the parking lot, leering at me. Shit. I called my boyfriend in the store, but it kept going to voicemail. I figured he was sleeping, and I was seriously scared to walk back home. I managed to calm myself down in the store, figuring the man must have been long gone. Yet, I was on high alert the entire walk home. It was starting to get dark, but I figured if I just stayed cautious and walked quickly, I would be fine. I couldn't be more wrong. When I was approaching the crosswalk that led to my street, I heard a car pulling up to the sidewalk. Followed by a sickeningly familiar voice barking, "Hey! Hi! Hey! Hi!" My heart dropped into my stomach. I glanced sideways at the car. With his unmistakable, now malicious-looking grin plastered on his face, the man's upper body was leaning out of his car window, as if he was trying to reach out to me. "Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck," he tauntingly called out. "So where's your boyfriend?" while cackling. From everything I've learned from true crime and horror stories, I figured it was best not to acknowledge the man. My mind racing while trying to appear composed, I knew I couldn't lead him to my house, and turning back to go to the mall or stores may have given away that I was terrified and trying to escape. Bless whoever designed my neighborhood, as the city's rec center was conveniently right next to my complex. I ignored him and casually crossed the street, quickening my pace as I headed into the rec center. I tried not to look back, scared that I would see the man running up on me, with his wide grin, but I made it into the rec center and finally looked behind me. I assumed the man would have followed me in, or waited for me in his car. Instead, he sped away down a street opposite from my house. With so much relief, I called my boyfriend, who woke up to my call. I was on the verge of breaking down, but managed to fill him in on everything. He rushed to the rec center, and after he helped me calm down, we walked home. My boyfriend asked if I got the man's license plate number, to which I felt like a fucking idiot. Not only was it too dark, but I was too consumed with fear for my own life that it didn't even cross my mind at the time. At the very least, I called the police, giving them a description of the man and the make and model of his car. They said they would do what they could, but I haven't heard back from them. I haven't seen that man since. Not in person, at least. Because I still see that man's smile in my dreams, haunting me for countless nights, plaguing my mind. Thinking about the sadistic, glaring look he had in his car reminds me that he was overjoyed to realize that I was alone and vulnerable, that my seemingly safe city isn't as safe as I thought. At the same time, I feel so grateful that the man never found out where I live. But, for all I know, he could be lurking around, trying to harm other women like he tried to that night he almost trailed me home. For mine and the women in my city's sake, I hope I don't have to find out. A few days ago, September 5th, I started receiving random calls around 10 p.m. from someone claiming to be DHL. They asked for my name and address, information they already had. I provided it, thinking it might be related to a lost package. Looking back, I should have been suspicious, especially since DHL doesn't deliver past 8 p.m. in Canada. The situation escalated when I got another call claiming they couldn't find my unit number and asked me to meet them at a nearby roundabout. Concerned, my dad patrolled the area and, after several laps, found a grey SUV. When confronted, they denied being the delivery persons. Strangely, the SUV disappeared during my dad's last lap. The following day, September 6th, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., our doorbell rang repeatedly, and two individuals in their 20s who knew my name were looking for me. Feeling unsafe, I didn't engage and called the police. They advised me to contact them if the situation persisted. On July 7th, everything seemed quiet, and we hoped the worst was over. However, on July 8th, around 11 p.m., my security camera caught an individual with a mask taking photos or videos of my house. Alarmed, We contacted the police about this peculiar behavior, but the terror didn't end there. In the early hours of July 8th, around 3 a.m., I heard thumping outside my balcony. Investigating, I found myself face to face with an intruder. I screamed for help and my family rushed down. Thankfully, I checked the balcony that day, averting a potential disaster. As of July 9th, sleep eludes me as I grapple with the fear of being targeted for a home invasion. How did they get my name, and what do they want from me? These questions loom large, leaving me anxious about the unsettling events that have unfolded. It's hard to articulate the profound horror that gripped me on that ominous night at the abandoned sanatorium. The nightmare unfolded when me and a group of my friends decided to delve into the unsettling rumors that shrouded the decaying structure. Little did I realize, I was stepping into a nightmarish reality. As we penetrated the sanatorium, the air hung damp and heavy, saturated with a mix of fear and anticipation. Our flashlights cast flickering beams that unveiled the grim, neglected hallways. The walls bore witness to the suffering of those confined within. Deeper into the asylum we ventured, our footsteps resonating through the darkness. My heart pounded with each creak of the floorboards, and my breath quickened as we approached a foreboding room. It was in that room that I first encountered the chilling whispers that would plague my dreams. A raspy voice seemed to emerge from the shadows, uttering words barely comprehensible. It was as if the very walls sought to convey their anguish. Despite exchanged glances of terror, curiosity prevailed, and we entered the room. In the feeble glow of our flashlights, we discovered a dilapidated diary on a rusty bed frame. As I began to read, my sense of dread intensified. The diary belonged to a former patient and detailed the horrifying experiments conducted on the sanatorium's inhabitants. Suddenly, the room turned bitterly cold, our breath forming frosty plumes. Inhuman shrieks echoed down the corridor, and then the lights of our flashlights began to flicker and fade. Panic consumed us as darkness closed in. Fumbling for an exit, it felt like an eternity before we burst into the moonlit night. The sanatorium stood silent, as if undisturbed, but we knew we had unearthed something malevolent within its walls. The memory of that forsaken place persists to this day, and the sinister whispers continue to haunt my nights. The sanatorium stands as a somber reminder of the darkness that lurks in the forgotten corners of our world, ready to terrify those who dare to explore. Everything in this story really happened. It all started when I moved in with my sister in her new house. I was given the smallest room, but it had a small door on the wall. I never went in there at first, but curiosity took over me. Like I just had to see what was behind that door. When I opened the door, I grabbed a flashlight because it was pretty dark, and I couldn't see, and went inside the little room. It was filled with cobwebs, like no person has been in there in a long time. It was creepy in there until I noticed the floorboards, like they had something put under them. I struggled to lift them. But when I did, I really wished that I didn't, because what was there scared me. It was a drawing that looks like it was made by a little kid. It was a drawing of a man that was really tall with no face. There was wood at the bottom of the piece of paper. The man in my window. After I read this, I was scared even more than I was before that. I dropped the paper and left the small room. I didn't sleep for weeks, not because of what I say, but it felt like I was being watched, or like something bad was going to happen to me or others. When this stopped, I decided to go back into the little room. When I did, I found more under the floor. I found pictures that looked like a little girl, about 5 years old, and an old teddy bear. After that, I left, not wanting to go back again. After that, tried to calm down, and went on my phone while sitting on my bed. When I turned my phone off, I could see a reflection behind me in the window that looked like the man in the drawing, and I turned around to see it was real. I screamed at the top of my lungs till my sister ran to my room to see it too. After that, we moved out of that house and very far away, but I still get the feeling that someone is watching me, and sometimes I see the man in the distance, and to this day, I am still scared of what I saw that day. I was 16, and me and my friends, I'll call Evan and Jake, wanted to rent a hotel for the night since it was spring break. We got to the hotel and checked in. It had a really funky smell, but we still stayed there. Once we got to our room, it was about 3 p.m., so we decided to go swimming. The pool was downstairs, departed from the hotel. Once we got to the entrance, there was a man at least 6'3" in all black with a hood covering his face. Facing us, I panicked a little, but not out loud. We got into the pool and swam for a few hours until we saw that man again, all black, sitting on a chair by the pool. I cleared my throat. Can I help you, sir?" I asked. No response. I still ease a little paranoid. I put my face in the water, and at the bottom of the pool was another figure that was all black. I screamed like a little girl and ran for the door. I looked back and saw nothing. Not the guy in the chair or the guy under the pool. My friends thought I was just seeing things, but I saw what I saw as clear as water. I didn't feel like swimming anymore, so I decided to get dinner at a nearby restaurant. I got a table for me and my friends to sit at, and there I saw once again the man all in black on the other side of the dining room and was staring at me. I have had enough. I went over there, and I lost track of him, and he took off. After we did, I decided this trip has gone too far, and we should leave tomorrow morning, but my friends didn't like that idea. Once it was 10:30, I and my friends dozed off in the hotel room. I woke up to some noises. I saw a shadow of a figure at the end of my bed. I calmed myself down and told myself that it was my hat that I put there before I went to bed. I went to bed and got woken up again 30 minutes later to more noises. I was getting thirsty, so I reached under the bed and tried to grab my water bottle, but I grabbed something, and I was totally shocked by what I grabbed. It was my hat. I was not ever more scared in my life. I couldn't help but to scream at the top of my lungs when I heard a voice next to my ear say, "You're a bitch." I jumped out of bed and realized it was two men in black, right there. I tried to fight them, but it was no use once they grabbed me and dragged me out of that room. I tried to scream, but that guy was covering my mouth. I passed out and woken up in a stretcher. It turned out those guys knifed me while I passed out, and someone caught them. But the doctor said no one could catch the guys who got me. To this day, I always have a nightlight at night, so I'm not scared.